Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. The board of the Reserve Bank held its monthly meeting yesterday and, as expected, left interest rates on hold and indicated it would continue its bond buying program until at least February. I wanted to see what EY's Chief Economist Jo Masters made of it all and what the next few months will look like as we emerge from lockdowns. Jo, welcome back to Fear and Greed.
Great to be talking to you.
First, what were the key messages out of the Reserve Bank yesterday?
As you would expect, there wasn't a huge amount of change in the statement. They told us a month ago that they wouldn't review the bond buying program until February, and the economy has largely performed as they had expected over the last month. In fact, if anything, they sounded more confident about the recovery. And I think there were some interesting comments from their business liaison, which is always insightful. They talked about businesses planning for the easing of restrictions in New South Wales and Victoria, and most importantly, that firms are looking to hire ahead of those restrictions easing. And of course, the labour market is critical to the economic and monetary policy outlook.
It seems to me the Reserve Bank being a little bit more upbeat, yet relative to many of its peers around the world, it certainly has no interest on doing anything on interest rates for a while. Compare that to the Fed and the Norwegian Central Bank, not that we talk about them that often, having lifted rates. It just seems to me that they are upbeat about the economy, but they're still very reticent about doing anything too much on monetary policy.
I think that difference is going to be laid bare this week with the Reserve Bank of New Zealand expected to raise rates. So, a very close neighbour and one where our economy is often compared to. And in fact, it's interesting that in the statement, they didn't talk about the global environment at all, either the positives or the negatives there. I think one of the big discussion points amongst central banks and among economists, of course, is inflation and whether the spike that we're seeing in headline inflation is transitory. Is it going to feed through to broad-based inflation pressures? Is it going to be entrenched? How is it going to sit against the tide of money that is still flowing through household balance sheets? Here in Australia, I guess the focus is still on the impact of Delta and the restrictions, ensuring that we do come out of that. And as you said, this sort of long-held belief that it will take a long time for wage pressure to build and for inflation to rise.
So do you think it's as transitory and nascent as the Reserve Bank does?
I tend to err on the side that a good portion of it is transitory.
Yep.
We've undeniably got supply chain disruptions still in play. We've got shipping routes that have been dislocated through COVID that have yet to normalise. And at some point, that system will sort of find its new equilibrium. And when it does, that will probably weigh on inflation, so bring inflation down in the period ahead. Having said that, though, I guess two sort of countering forces that we've got. The first one is there is a lot of demand coming and economies are seemingly recovering quite quickly. And alongside that, labour markets are recovering quite quickly. We're hearing about skill shortages in Australia, even though we've got this significant economic shock to activity. If that flows through to broad-based wage pressure, that is the number one influencer of generalised inflation pressures and would suggest that you will get lift off on inflation a bit earlier than the RBA's forecasts.
Okay, what sort of role do state border closures play on wage pressures? And I suppose specifically I'm thinking about labour mobility into Western Australia and the fact that those borders are closed so hard. Tourism in Queensland would be the same story as we come into the summer season. Does it make much of a difference if they keep their borders closed, no one can go and visit Queensland anyway, but still, they're crying out for miners in Western Australia.
So traditionally, Australians are actually not very mobile across state borders when you compare to, say, the US, for example, or even the UK. And I actually think one of the aspects to the skill shortages that we're seeing is to think not just about opening our international border and skill migration, which is undeniably important, but what can we do to try and encourage more interstate mobility by Australians, and also think about the skills channel that making sure that we're training people for the jobs that we're going to have in the future. Look, at the end of the day, when domestic borders are closed, that's a barrier to free-flowing economic activity. Therefore, it has an economic cost. And I think the sooner we can get domestic borders not just open, but for people to be confident that they will remain open, that I will get to my holiday, that my business trip, or in my case, my presentation in Melbourne will go ahead. That I think will be really, really important.
Okay. Now, you mentioned a moment ago the idea of just how important the employment market is. We have an unemployment rate of 4.5%. Not that anyone thinks that actually reflects the true depth of unemployment here. What do you think will happen? What will be the trajectory of the employment market over the next 3 to 6 months?
So I think one of the most important things to remember is that the impact of COVID is uneven. That has been true right from the start, and it's uneven across states, it's uneven across sectors of the economy, and it's uneven across people's lives. So look, all the signs are that the labour market will recover reasonably quickly. Job ads are strong, job vacancies are strong. We've got this comment from the RBA that their business liaison is saying that firms are hiring ahead of restrictions easing. We've also got, and we've not had this before, the expectation of ongoing workforce disruption because of this ongoing need to trace, track, isolate and quarantine. And we've seen that in the UK, where there are firms reporting 20 to 30% of their workforce are quarantining at any given moment. And we're hearing already in Australia of some businesses where work from home is not possible. So accommodation and food services, retail stores, for example, looking to increase their workforce to try and manage that. So look, the signs are good, but we've had a very significant economic shock. And so it will take time to recover, even in a good scenario.
Stay with me, Jo. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is EY Chief Economist Jo Masters. Okay, just shifting gear a little bit to consumers. The Commonwealth Bank recently reported that its customers have around $10,000 extra in their accounts compared to normal times. When we come out of lockdowns, and New South Wales, that'll be in the next few weeks, and Victoria hopefully will be in sort of 6 to 8 weeks' time, and the ACT somewhere in between probably, how big a boost to consumer spending do you think we'll see?
I think over the next sort of 0 to 9 to 12 months, we're going to have quite a significant boost. It may not be immediate because there is the likelihood that at least some people will remain cautious about being out and about in the community, even if they're vaccinated. Classic example, perhaps their young children are not vaccinated. And I feel like the sort of surge in buying goods for my home has largely run its course. We've bought our sofas and our air fryers and our PlayStations and the like. So the spending is really around services. And it's
Jo, did you really buy an air fryer?
I bought 2.
Jo.
There is a story to that, though. I bought a smaller, cheaper one as a minimum value proposition.
Yeah.
If my daughters used it, and they used it so much, I then bought
the better. Yeah, right. Okay, sorry. I keep going. You threw me there on the air fryer.
I got to tell you, we use it every day.
Is that right?
Component. Anyway, listen. So, our balance sheets are good. Household balance sheets are strong. We've saved a lot of money. People will want to spend on services. It might take a bit of time to get out there. Even think about booking an international holiday. Sounds great. Everything I'm reading says the paperwork's a nightmare. The admin's a nightmare. You can still get caught somewhere. Don't go to too many countries. Parents might be worried about their kids missing any more schooling. So there's a lot of moving parts, but overall, I do think that consumption will be a key driver of the recovery process over the next year.
Okay, and just while you're here, Jo, a quick one on house prices. The Reserve Bank did talk about the Council of Financial Regulators yesterday, and it actually talked about ensuring there was an adequate buffer for loan servicing. Whether that's a hint at something, I'm not sure. I mean, what do you think will happen to house prices, and do you expect regulators will actually step in and do something in the next 3 to 6 months?
So it seems pretty clear that we will be getting some kind of macroprudential controls later this year or early next year. We've had the Treasurer, the Council of Financial Regulators, and now the Reserve Bank reasonably clear about that. Focus on loan to income ratios. We're hearing that with new loans, 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 has got debt to income ratio of over 6 times. And obviously, perhaps a focus there on serviceability buffers as well. And look, that's appropriate when you think that it's not just investors driving the market, it's more broadly based. So in that environment, look, house prices are already beginning to slow on a month-on-month basis. And these type of macroprudential controls, when we've done them before, they do slow the market. They are effective though, right? They're quite nuanced. Banks can be quite targeted in them. And the 2 times we've used them before, we've slowed the market, not crashed the market.
Yeah.
So I think that is sort of what we're looking at going forward. I think house prices continue to rise, but at a much more slower pace than we've seen than over the last year.
Now, Jo, the final question is the most important one, of course. Prior to COVID, I know what your travel schedule was like, and it was crazy. And the last 18 months, you have continued working just as hard, but you're doing it from home. Are you looking forward to lockdowns finishing and resuming that sort of travel schedule?
I'm really looking forward to getting back in the office, and I am actually looking forward to getting into offices around Australia. I actually did a reasonable amount of travel just before this lockdown. In fact, the week before the Sydney lockdown, I did 2 domestic flights and 2 international flights to New Zealand.
Yeah.
And, look, I hope I don't travel as much as I did before COVID, but I am looking forward to getting face-to-face with my colleagues and my clients and my friends.
Good. Jo, thanks for talking to Fear and Greed.
My pleasure.
That was Jo Masters, Chief Economist at EY. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join me every morning for the full Fear and Greed podcast with all the business news you need to know. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.